featuring music from Disturbed, Drowning Pool, Deftones, and a host of other hot artists.
Hey. Now I've been seeing this wave of new metal hit my timeline again. Instagram keeps throwing it at me, but one post actually got me to stop scrolling and made me think. It was a fan saying he knew Deftones from Cooler's Revenge and not from TikTok, and it started me down a rabbit hole about how those old Dragon Ball movies had such fun soundtracks. Now watching Bardock stand alone against Frieza with Drowning Pool roaring in the background, that's peak. The second that song kicks in, I can recite Bardock's entire speech word for word. It's just muscle memory at this point. Now, I grew up in the early 2000s with Dragon Ball on Toonami and the old Funimation dub being the only version a 4-year-old like me at the time had any access to. And during those movies and TV specials that aired on Cartoon Network's Toonami block, there was something more than the fights that pulled me in. It was the music. This was my introduction to metal. Now, I came from a house where the soundtrack of my life at the time was oldies and corridos. I didn't have a genre that felt like mine, but the moment I heard Tendril in the Trunks special, the moment Pantera screamed through the Broly movie, something fundamentally shifted in me. It was like a door opening to a version of myself I had no idea existed yet. That introduction set me down a path to music I'm still grateful for today, and I know I'm not alone. So many of us who grew up in that era were shaped that same way. As I got older, I started seeing more and more metal bands dropping merch inspired by Dragon Ball, proof that this crossover meant something to an entire generation. Almost every friend I made in the metal and punk scenes, even the ones who never cared much for Dragon Ball itself, still respected those early movies because of the music. It was bigger than the show, it was bigger than the fights, it was a whole culture quietly forming in the background, shaping kids like us without us even realizing it. And honestly, I don't think I would have found that straight edge hardcore lifestyle if it wasn't for those soundtracks giving me that first spark to look into more. Now, the early 2000s marked a distinct period in anime localization, particularly for Funimation, frequently employed licensed new metal and groove metal music for the dubs of Dragon Ball Z movies and TV specials like Bardock and Trunks. This strategy led to some incredibly iconic moments, such as the famous Broly transformation scene set to Pantera's 10, which remains celebrated by fans to this date. Other prominent bands used include Disturbed, Deftones, Drowning Pool. While Funimation popularized this approach, they were not the first company to use major rock acts in their anime releases. SMV used Alice in Chains and Korn in the Street Fighter II animated movie, and ADV used the Offsprings and Stabbing Westward in Techno VA. Funimation, based in Flora Mound, Texas, took the strategy one step further, often tapping into local music scene for its soundtrack. This is most evident in the Broly films, which ironically featured a mix of major and surprisingly obscure Texas-based bands like Haji's Kitchen, Ion, Dosu, Slow Roosevelt, and Gravity Pool. Now you're probably asking, why new metal, right? The choice of new metal was a direct reflection of the genre's dominance in the late 1990s and early 2000s. It was everywhere. Its presence spanned cultural touchpoints from WWE intros and video games to trailers like the one for Halo 2. Now, new metal's massive success stemmed from its unique ability to combine the cathartic energy of metal with the mainstream accessibility of hip-hop and alternative rock during a cultural shift. The musical fusion and sound was pioneered by bands like Korn in the mid-1990s, emphasizing more rhythmic, low-tuned guitars and a mix of singing, rapping, and screaming. Precursors like Faith No More and Rage Against the Machine had already paved that way for a rap-rock blending. Bands like Linkin Park, Limp Bizkit, and Slipknot created catchy songs with strong, pop-sensible hooks. This allowed their heavy sound to be played on mainstream radio alongside pop acts, giving them more of a widespread appeal. Nu metal often explored themes of personal struggle, angst, and social issues, strongly resonating with a new generation of disaffected youth. Limp Bizkit, for example, expertly captured the energy of youthful rebellion. Now, this hybrid sound and visual identity attracted a diverse demographic, including a significant female fan base, which was crucial to the genre's commercial success, allowing bands to sell tens of millions of albums before its popularity began to wane in the mid-2000s. Now, it seems like Funimation made a conscious decision around 2000 or 2001 to chase this heavier musical direction. Pull in the kids who were growing up right alongside the rise of bands like Disturbed, Pantera, and everything else dominating the early metal scene, and honestly, when you look back at it, it makes sense that the sound fits that era. Now, we can thank this musical choice for someone that worked at Funimation at that time, Dale Kelly. Dale Kelly was the voice of Captain Ginyu and the narrator for Dragon Ball Season 3 and 4 in the Funimation dub.
Because up in Kami's Lookout, behind the doors of the hyperbolic time chamber, Goku and Gohan continue to train.
Now, Dale had a deep connection with music labels from his time in radio, and according to him, he was originally supposed to score all the movies. Now, it seems like things got messy. There were issues surrounding royalty payments. Payments Funimation reportedly didn't want to make, and because of the oversight, the whole thing backfired on Dale financially. So Dale Kelly talked a lot about the struggle behind getting some bands into the Bardock movie, and honestly it paints a whole different picture of this era. Because of the royalty dispute with Funimation, he had almost nothing, literally almost nothing to pay these bands in royalties. He even said, I got like 25 cents in royalties to give to everybody, and I need some bands. So Dale reached out to a friend over at Island Def Jam Records, and the connection changed everything for him. His friend sent him a bunch of tracks from some emerging bands, music that were willing to let him use because in Dale's words, the royalty's cool. And somehow through all of that, he still managed to pull in bands like Saliva and Sum 41, and others that would go on to define the early 2000s rock and metal landscape. Now eventually this tension and legal risk led to Dale being let go, and the licensed music started disappearing from the movie soon after. By then, Funimation had brought in Mensa and other composers to finish off the remaining films. Dale talks about this all in his interview on the Final Forum podcast. I have it linked down below. Show some love to them. It's a generally good Dragon Ball podcast. Not really well known, it seems. Now, the idea of keeping that music in the movies is still a huge debate among fans. Some people want the original score preserved exactly as it was, while others welcome the metal and new metal direction because it captures that early 2000s AMV energy we all grew up with. It's a divisive topic, and honestly, I understand why. But for kids like me, the ones who only version of Dragon Ball at the time was this era, it made those scenes feel electrifying. Still, to this day, Pantera's Tans is my personal PR song. The whole genre became intertwined with Dragon Ball for me. I can't even look at Tien without hearing 3 Days Grace in my head, and I genuinely love it. Just like I genuinely love the original Japanese score. Now I'll admit the metal sound doesn't really fit with the early Dragon Ball days when Goku's a kid, but the moment the series leaves Earth, when we start touching space and destiny and Saiyan heritage, that's where the style starts to feel at home. And the truth is, the music itself is fine. The real question is how well it fits Dragon Ball. Now we've seen different levels of success with that over the years. Dragon Ball is one of those stories where if you really sit with it, you start to understand the world Toriyama built. The warmth, the loneliness, the humor, the weight of legacy, the music should reflect that. Now heavy tracks absolutely work in certain fights, but the moments in between, the quiet times, the training breaks, the small conversations under alien skies, those need room to breathe. Dragon Ball is about action, yes, but it's not only action. When the soundtrack is constantly blaring, it can smother the atmosphere instead of elevating it. Now at the end of the day, this whole era of Dragon Ball, these movies, these soundtracks, these strange little creative risks became something bigger than anyone expected. Whether you love the original score or the metal-infused Funimation cuts, both versions shaped someone. Both versions mattered. For a lot of us, that music was more than just background noise. It was the echo of a childhood spent watching Toonami after school. The spark that pushed us towards new genres, new communities, new versions of ourselves. It was a sound of discovering identity without even realizing it. For some fans, it was the first time they ever heard metal. For others, it was the bridge that led them into whole music scenes, punk, hardcore, pop punk, everything in between. And that's what makes this conversation so special. This isn't really about whether Pantera fits the Broly movie or whether the original score is the purest choice. It's about the memories tied to those moments and the way that the single guitar riff shaped an entire generation of metalheads. You can see it in their merch drops from modern bands like Rings of Saturn. The references and lyrics, the riffs inspired by fight scenes, the way concerts still erupt when someone spots a Goku patch on a battle jacket. So many people in the metal and punk scenes, whether they love Dragon Ball or only caught glimpses of it, grew up respecting these movies because of that music. It blurred the line between two cultures that were never supposed to meet. Now, Dragon Ball has always been about evolution, about finding strength in places you didn't know you had, and for a lot of us, that strength came with a soundtrack we never expected. A soundtrack that didn't just introduce us to metal, but raised us into kind of people who would carry that genre for decades. So whether you prefer Takahashi's ethereal melodies or Disturbed blasting through a VHS tape, the beauty of Dragon Ball is that all of it belongs. All of it shaped the community, all of it shaped us. And that's something worth remembering. But, as always, I want to hear what you guys have to say. Drop a comment down below if you like the music, if you didn't like the music, if it affected you as a kid, or if you caught it when you were older. Leave a like if you liked the video, sub if you want to see more. This is kind of my yap channel for whatever comes to mind about Dragon Ball, and I just toss it on here, so videos vary a little bit. Drop a metal cooler down below. I'm gonna go put on some Limp Bizkit and go hit a nasty chest day. I'll see y'all later. Have a damn good one. Peace.